He said it with a smirk, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Fix this, and I'll give you $100 million." The room laughed, not because the problem was funny, but because of who he was mocking. A powerful CEO, a spotless boardroom, and standing quietly at the edge, the maid's daughter, young, ignored, and never meant to speak. They didn't see her as smart. They didn't see her as capable. They barely saw her at all. But in the next few seconds, something happened that flipped the room upside down and exposed a truth about prejudice that money couldn't hide. The question is, why did the laughter stop so suddenly? Before that moment, her life moved quietly in the background of other people's success. She woke before sunrise, helped her mother prepare for work, and spent her mornings solving problems no one ever asked her to solve. Numbers scribbled in old notebooks, patterns hidden in things most people ignored. She wasn't praised for being smart. She wasn't encouraged to speak up. She was taught early on to stay invisible. Her mother cleaned offices that glittered with power, glass walls, polished floors, rooms where decisions were made that shaped entire industries. The daughter sometimes came along after school, sitting in corners, watching men in suits move confidently through a world that felt sealed off from her. To them, she was just part of the scenery, another reminder of who belonged and who didn't. The CEO who ran the building was known for his brilliance and his ego. He believed intelligence had a look, a background, a pedigree. In his world, respect was earned by titles and skin tones that matched the room. People like the maid and her daughter were never meant to cross certain lines. That day began like any other, routine, predictable, forgettable. No one expected a challenge. No one expected a test. And certainly no one expected the solution to come from someone they refused to acknowledge. But beneath the calm surface of that polished office, something was already shifting. A moment was approaching, one that would expose how deeply prejudice can blind even the most powerful minds. And when it arrived, there would be no way to look away. The problem appeared on the massive screen like a challenge no one wanted. Complex, time-sensitive, the kind of issue that had already burned through entire teams of highly paid experts. Graphs overlapped, numbers clashed, the room filled with restless confidence, slowly turning into discomfort. Executives leaned forward, then leaned back. Solutions were suggested, dismissed, rewritten, and abandoned. Every attempt circled the same dead end. Minutes passed, then more. The certainty that usually filled the room began to crack. That was when the tone shifted. What started as impatience became mockery, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Eyes drifted away from the screen and toward the edges of the room, where the maid stood quietly with her daughter. The laughter didn't need words. It carried an old, familiar message: you don't belong here. The daughter felt it immediately. The weight of being seen without being respected. She had seen that look her entire life, on buses, in classrooms, in places where her intelligence was invisible long before she spoke. She kept her eyes down, her thoughts racing, because unlike the people at the table, she understood the problem, not vaguely, not theoretically, completely. Her mind moved faster than the room allowed. She saw the flaw everyone else missed. A small assumption buried deep in the model, a shortcut taken because no one expected consequences. To her, it stood out like a crack in glass. But she hesitated. This wasn't her space. She knew the cost of stepping forward. She had watched her mother shrink herself to survive. She had learned that brilliance didn't protect people who looked like them. It challenged the order, and challenging the order always came with a price. Still, the tension grew heavier. The CEO's confidence hardened into something colder. Authority, when threatened, often lashes out. The offer that followed wasn't generous. It was performative, a test designed to humiliate, not invite. The room waited for the punchline. What no one noticed was the shift happening behind the scenes. The daughter stepped closer to the screen, not with arrogance, but with certainty, the kind that comes from knowing the answer long before permission is given. Heads turned, brows tightened, discomfort rippled through the room. She pointed, not dramatically, not defiantly, but precisely. The flaw was exposed in seconds. One assumption unraveled, then another. The entire structure collapsed and rebuilt itself in real time. What had seemed impossible suddenly became obvious. The laughter vanished. Faces froze. Pride drained into silence. The problem that had humiliated an entire boardroom was no longer a mystery. It was solved, cleanly, efficiently, undeniably. And in that moment, something far more dangerous than failure filled the room. Realization. Because the solution didn't just come from the wrong person. It came from someone they had already decided was incapable. The question was no longer whether the problem was solved. It was whether the room was ready to face what their prejudice had just cost them.
The air in the room changed instantly. What had been confidence curdled into something sharper, defensiveness. The solution sat undeniable on the screen, flawless and complete, yet no one moved to acknowledge it. Power does not surrender easily, especially when exposed. The CEO's authority, once unquestioned, now felt fragile. The truth was dangerous, not because it was wrong, but because it shattered the hierarchy everyone depended on. A child, a maid's daughter, someone never meant to stand at the center of that room, had just rewritten the rules. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Every second without recognition became its own act of injustice. The daughter felt it press against her chest, not fear, but something colder. The realization that being right was not enough, that brilliance did not guarantee safety or respect, that for people like her, excellence often came with punishment instead of praise. Eyes avoided her. Credit drifted away from where it belonged. The room searched desperately for a way to reclaim control. This wasn't just about a problem being solved anymore. It was about preserving an image, a system built on deciding who mattered before they ever spoke. Her mother stood frozen at the edge of the room, watching history teeter on a knife's edge. Pride warred with dread. She had spent her life staying small to survive. Now her daughter was standing tall in a place that had never made room for either of them. And then it happened. The truth became unavoidable. The data spoke louder than authority. The solution worked. Every projection aligned. Every outcome improved. There was nowhere left to hide. What followed was not celebration, but reckoning. Because acknowledging her meant admitting something far more uncomfortable, that prejudice had blinded power, that arrogance had cost millions, and that the people deemed invisible had been capable all along. In that moment, the daughter understood something that would change her forever. This victory would not be freely given. It would have to be taken. And what came next would reveal whether justice was possible or whether the system would punish her simply for being right.
The room never returned to what it was before. The problem was solved, the numbers verified, and the truth impossible to deny. Recognition came, but not with applause. It arrived cautiously, measured, filtered through discomfort. The reward that had once been offered as mockery became a quiet obligation, stripped of its arrogance. For the maid's daughter, the moment did not feel like triumph. It felt like awakening. She walked out of that building knowing something had shifted, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She understood now that her intelligence had never been invisible, only ignored, and that being exceptional in a world shaped by bias meant constantly having to prove what should never have been questioned. Her mother returned to work the next day, but something was different. She no longer carried just fatigue and silence. She carried pride, a reminder that dignity does not come from titles or uniforms, but from resilience passed quietly from one generation to the next. Yet this story is bigger than one room, one company, or one moment of recognition. It reflects a pattern repeated across classrooms, workplaces, and streets around the world, where talent is dismissed before it is heard, and potential is overlooked because of skin color, background, or status. How many ideas have been lost because the wrong voices were silenced? How many futures were delayed because prejudice decided who belonged? The solution was never just on that screen. It was in the willingness to see people fully, to listen without judgment, and to challenge systems that reward arrogance over truth. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Question the spaces you're part of. Because change doesn't begin with power. It begins with awareness. And the next time brilliance stands quietly in the corner, will you notice it or look away?